Welcome to the Spirituality What? Podcast, where we explore the mysteries, joys, and challenges of being spiritual beings navigating our unpredictable human experience we call life here on planet Earth. I'm your friendly guide, Rebecca, ready to jump into our adventure of the day. Hello, Spirituality What? Listeners, I am thrilled today to bring you another awesome episode on the podcast. Today, we are going to talk with Malaika MaVeena Darville about ecstatic dance and spirituality. So Malaika is a qualified ISHTA yoga teacher. She's a qualified water dance practitioner, a Hawaiian body worker, a permaculturist, an African dance performer, and a teacher. She's an ecstatic dance DJ, a ceremonialist, and the creatrix of the 5 elements dance activation, shamanic, dynamic meditation dance journey practice, which includes all of the 5 elements. She's dedicated to creating sacred space through ritual, ceremony, and embodiment to bring personal and planetary awakening. And she's currently based out of Bali, though maybe making some moves around the world. And we're excited to have her today to talk a little bit about her amazing experience and journey to dance and through dance. And she talks a little bit about how dance is used in ceremony in Africa and how they dance through grief and how dance connects us to our ancestors and what it's like to work with rhythmically challenged cultures and the emotional tolls and the emotional connections that come with that. And also about how she uses ancient and modern cultures to raise joy and happiness in the world through ecstatic dance. So we're really excited to have her on today. Malaika and I, this was the first time we had met each other through this podcast. I had actually heard her on another podcast and was really intrigued by what she was saying and her connection to spirituality. And so I just reached out and was like, hey, do you want to be on the podcast? And she thankfully agreed. So we're going to dive into it. I am super excited today to welcome Malaika to the Spirituality What podcast. So Malaika, if you would give your introduction.
Hola, greetings from Mexico. Malaika MaVeena Darville here, and super excited to be here as well. Thank you so much for inviting me on. And I guess some have called me a modern-day medicine woman. I didn't really give myself that title, but I've been called that by many. And I'm a global movement facilitator. I've developed the 5 elements dance activation and been sharing that all over the world. And I have been working with women and specifically for a very, very long time, more than 30 years. So I see myself as one of those light workers on the planet who is carrying those codes for awakening, for this crazy time and shifting times, transitional times that we're going through right now. Yeah. So wear many hats. I'm a pioneer of the conscious dance movement that I started back in the day, 35 years ago in Australia, as an antithesis to the kind of drunken culture that I found myself in Australia. And I've always loved to dance, and I wanted to dance, but I didn't want to have to inhale other people's cigarettes and have drunk people falling all over me. So that was kind of like the need. There was a real need for it. And I created that in my community, and it started to spread with wildfire. And like a lot of other things, blessing ways, reviving the blessing way ceremonies for women, reviving blood rites for young girls, reviving initiation ceremonies for young boys. I see myself as that kind of pioneer leader in some senses of the word.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm really excited about this episode for sure. So the very first question that I ask everybody on this podcast is, what does spirituality mean to you?
Well, I guess spirituality, I've always lived a spiritual life. And for me, it's the quality of being aware of our soul or the human spirit, as opposed to only being focused and concerned with material and the physical things. So for me, at a very early age, I had communication with my ancestors. I didn't really know that that's who they were or what I was communicating to, but I definitely had an open line of communication to my ancestors. And it wasn't until I went to Africa that I realized that that's who I was communicating with, my mother. And that was
cool.
kind of what sent me on my journey, my journey with dance and my journey with music, and was this reconnecting to my ancestors. So they don't exist in the physical realm. They exist in the spiritual realm. And I had a very strong awareness of them, even though there was no one in my culture that explained to me what it was that I was communing with. In fact, I used to get in trouble for communing and asking questions about this. And my mother is from Jamaica. So
Very cool.
Yeah, my ancestors go way back, like to the early 1600s was the first arrivals from England to Jamaica. So of course, like the Jamaican dollar bill says, out of many, one people. And that's kind of what I feel like. And I've always, written this thing of one love and one people and one world, and, not the one world government that, we're leaning into right now, but the concept of, we are one on this one living organism.
The consciousness.
Gaia, the consciousness of oneness. Yep. And, so my mother being Jamaican, I really had this longing. There was a lot of shame around our ancestry that was connected with the black side of our ancestry. And we've all got curly hair. We all go very brown in the sun. I do not look like your typical white woman. And people used to ask me as I started getting older, yeah, but what else do you have? And I didn't really know. So I think that longing to know what was in my own DNA was also how my ancestors started reaching out and connecting to me. And that took me to Africa. And that opened up the whole connection to dance, which is what this podcast is about. So
absolutely. Yeah, that's awesome. So let's dive into, before we get to sort of the connection, a little bit more about your history with dance, if you want to start with that exposure in Africa or wherever you want to start.
It was, we were always dancing as children growing up. Like my mother being Jamaican, we always had, Harry Belafonte was my mother's cousin. So, we always had all those Jamaican calypso songs playing in the living room. And there was just, dance and movement was always a part of our growing up. But then it was very much, tried to be controlled into gymnastics, into Highland dancing where you don't move your hips. Gotcha. And I always had a big butt. I got a Jamaican, I inherited a Jamaican butt. So I didn't qualify for, any of those things my sisters did. They went on to like high levels in gymnastics, high levels in Highland dance and stuff. And me, I just wanted to like shake my booty. I wanted to like, be more than that. And my grandmother, my Jamaican grandmother, as she got dementia, she used to always say, I should have been an opera singer, and she really wanted to sing opera. She had a beautiful voice and she loved to sing. And I didn't want to be that person, in her years going, regretting. I wish I had been a dancer. So literally when most people are finishing their dance career, I was just starting at 29, 29. My first Saturn return was when I went to Africa on this kind of journey of like healing the ancestral thing, and ended up in Gambia, which was the roots of where our Jamaican ancestors came from. And I, without a shadow of a doubt, was shown all of that in very, very spiritual ways that, when you're on your spiritual path, what starts happening is you get into a flow state.
Absolutely. Yep.
And synchronicities become the norm, not the extraordinary. Oh, I had this, I was thinking of that person and then bang, they popped up in my reality. For me, it's just a normal occurrence to live in that kind of field of synchronicities. Awesome. So the dance, in Africa, you dance for every reason. I mean, dance is just such a huge part of culture. Every time a baby's born, which is a lot in Africa, there's a huge ceremony. They don't celebrate birthdays. You get one big, huge birthday when you're, about a month old, 6 weeks old, 3 months old. They have a ceremony to announce the new arrival of the new person and do a big celebration.
Oh, very cool.
And so there's ceremonies constantly. And then, of course, when somebody gets married, there's a massive celebration. When somebody dies, there's a massive celebration and you dance even through death. So I learned about that as well. which I'm using now. I'm dancing through the grief of the loss of my grandson at the moment, and I'm using my dance practice to get me through this grieving process. I learned so much. You dance when you plant seeds. I just did a seed saving workshop I ran here in Mexico because they didn't, I couldn't get organic seeds here. So I thought that's also one of the wisdoms that I carry, that I've been studying forever, and that I share and pass on. And for me, the seeds, the dance, the connection to our feminine nature, the feminine qualities, the embodiment practices, Tantra, I've studied Tantra and teach Tantra. All of them come underneath this same kind of spiritual blanket of walking on your spiritual path. For me, spirituality is not something that just happens when you're sitting in meditation. It happens when you're dancing. I've had the most profound spiritual awakenings when I'm like lost in the ecstasy of dance. And that's actually one of my favorite things to do on the planet, is to get into those states. And I experienced those states in Africa because, when there was a ceremony happening, we would dance and dance and dance until the sun came up, and it was all on human energy, So the caller, the lead singer would start a chant, and then all the voices, the whole village would just join in. Oh, we're doing that song,
Wow.
And they just join in, and, and it would just get higher and higher, and the drummers are being fed. There's a perfect marriage between the music and the dancers. The drummers are being fed by the dancers, and the dancers are being fed by the drummers and the musicians. And there's this like whole, circuit of energy that gets built. And what they're doing is they're building a vortex, a power of vortex to open the portal, which is when the ancestors come through. So then at about 4 o'clock in the morning, people start getting possessed by the ancestors and bringing through messages of how to solve some kind of problem or issue that's happening in the village. So there was profound wisdom within this science of using dance to lead a more harmonious and spiritual life in harmony with both yourself, the community, the village, and each other, and Gaia, planet Mother Earth.
Yep.
So when I got back to Australia, was where I was living at the time, which is not a rhythm or dance-based culture, right?
Yep.
Other than the Aboriginals, the Indigenous people, they certainly dance is a huge part of their culture and music. They call them the song lines. They dance these lines through the country, but they were just about obliterated through colonization, and the white people are coming from England mainly, did not come from a dance culture, and there's a lot of shame and embarrassment around dancing. So, the only place that people would dance was to drink copious amounts of alcohol to get out of it.
Yep, where their inhibitions are lower and they are less in their head in general.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And so I started teaching African dance, trying to have the experience that I had in Africa. And, it's very hard when people don't come from a rhythm-based culture. It was like, no, there's the one. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
Put your foot down now.
Yeah.
So they were getting frustrated in some senses. They weren't, because African dance is also very complex, I realized, for most people. Like the footsteps and the choreography, per se, can be quite complex. And for me, it was easy because it's in my ancestral blood. It was in my nature, and I grew up with rhythm. So it was easy for me. But for where I was teaching it, it was not becoming easy. And I'd do these week-long workshops, and I realized it was dealing with the shame. It was dealing with the guilt of being seen, dancing without it being inebriated. It was all these things. So I started developing all these processes to get people to the point where they didn't care anymore, where they could just dance. And I simplified things down to just, very basic movements. And then, a good African dance class, you'd have maybe, 15 to 30 people was a really good one. It was a niche thing to attract people to. So I started doing my yoga teacher training because I was interested in Ayurveda. I was interested in all philosophies of all different cultures other than the Western culture, of like how to get back to some sort of semblance of humanity that is in harmony, living with nature. And so I would turn to these, ancient cultures to look for solutions of how to bring our Western culture back into alignment. And the dominant culture, of course, you know, dance was not a primary part of our culture. Whereas all indigenous cultures, I found there was that common denominator of dance as a huge part of every ritual, every ceremony, every healing. You know, there was music and dance. You know, it's part of being human. So with the yoga, I found again too in yoga, you know, Ayurveda, which was based in the 5 elements, and I was working really strongly with earth, water, fire, and air. But then ether was the space, you know, and there's more space than anything else. Exactly. And it was like everything for me to understand something complex. I need to understand it first through my physical body. So it came to me like a download of the 5 elements dance activation, of dancing, the 5 elements dance activation. And I started teaching that as a way to bring back harmony and balance. Just like in Ayurveda, you know, you're balancing these your doshas to get back to a sattvic state or a more harmonious, balanced state with the energies of air and earth and water and fire in your body. So I created it as a dance practice because first and foremost, I love to dance. And I love music, and I love good music, and I like, you know, I like to have one foot in both worlds, the ancient world and the modern world, of how, you know, can we use the best of both of these two ancient and modern cultures to bring back more harmony and more happiness into people's lives. So I created that, and then that morphed into, you know, the conscious dance movement. And when I did my, you know, the first 5 elements dance activation with my ex who was teaching the drumming. And, you know, it gets pretty boring with teaching like beginner drummers, you know, the you know, these rhythms. And I was like, don't you want to just like drum and, you know, like be able to just drum? So we created like the electronic beats, you know, tapping into that modern fire, and then putting the live music for each of the elements over top of that music. And that was like amazing. That was like a bomb, you know, and we had like 160 people come to the first one. And I was like,
cool.
Yeah, I was like very cool and very abundant and very like, whoa, you know, this is needed in the world, you know? And then when I went through my divorce, you know, and we were still trying to hold that space, it went from that 160 down to like 6. So then we split, that finished, and I got more into, well, when I first started, like spirit kind of telling me, you know, do this practice, you know, do this practice, one, to heal myself. It was how I came back to my center, was doing my own practice of the 5 elements dance. And then when I started to go and teach it again, I was missing, you know, the music factor, because I had my ex doing the music. So, you know, I ended up getting into the DJing. And then when I came to Bali, you know, I've been living in Bali for the last 10 years. When I first got there, they had Ecstatic Dance was just kind of starting. It was nowhere near as big as it is now. And I really wanted to bring that spiritual element that I bring to the ecstatic dance scene. And I really feel like I initiated that. And I asked them, you know, I really want to play here. And next thing you know, like back in 2014, at the beginning of 2014, I started DJing for the ecstatic dance at the Yoga Barn, and doing that on a twice monthly basis. And that blew up into it now happening. You know, it's like a massive movement. You know, you could probably do ecstatic dance every single day in Bali, I know, and it has one of the sexiest dance floors on the planet. And you know, so I started teaching that as well, and bringing in all of those processes that I went through and that I developed, both for myself to get myself there and to support others so that they can be holding that space, and how to bring community back together again. Because for me, in Africa, you know, going back to my roots and going back to the root of it all, Africa, life is hard, you know, and for all of us, life can be, you know, kind of a challenge, like just to be a human being, especially in these times.
It is definitely a challenge. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And what makes it magic and what makes it like fun and makes it enjoyable and endurable and, you know, gives purpose to our existence is this bringing everyone back together in community, where you laugh and you cry and you release all that tension and you release all that hardness of being alive, and you bring it just back to the joy of being alive, like just for the sake of existence, just for the sake. And I find that that's what is lacking in our modern day culture, and why so many people take to drugs, take to suicide, especially our younger generation, having just gone through COVID, where they were like so isolated,
siloed and separated.
Yeah. And that separation is like, we didn't become a super species through separation and individuality.
Exactly.
We became a super species because we supported each other, and because we love each other, and because we held each other, both our elders and our young people, and we had community, and that's how we became the super species on this planet.
Yep.
And because we utilized the elements and the abundance of the earth, and through greed and lack of sharing and lack of the feminine principles. So a lot of the work that I do now, I've gone back again, coming full circle to doing my women's work, because without the feminine, we're just going round and round in circles. And if you're in a boat out in the ocean and you're just paddling with one oar, the masculine oar, it just becomes a spiral. You just go round and round in circles. And so activating the feminine oar, activating the feminine principles and awakening women to their potential and their birthright of what is the potency that's inside every single woman's womb. It's your birthright, is this potential, these seeds that we carry just by having a womb and having this cycle. And so teaching women again the power in that, and how to harness that, to not lead with your masculine, but to lead with the feminine, and that means helping women to understand that through the feminist movement, we donned the masculine mask. We became very good at bringing our masculine forward, because within each of us, we have the feminine, we have the masculine.
Yes.
Yeah. So learning how to take your masculine and place him behind you. Sometimes you need to bring him out front, and to get shit done, you need to activate that masculine. But then, you can pull him forward when you need to get shit done, but you're leading in a way that is feminine. And we don't see that anywhere in our governance, in our education systems, in anything in the world. Those feminine principles of nurturing first, of care for other first, of self-care first, of deep listening to, what wants to happen versus the logical mind of this needs to happen, so we don't even know sometimes that we're doing that. So I've created what I teach and the way that I teach in ways that are really potent, powerful rituals and ceremonies, because I find them, you can do a really powerful ceremony once, and it can be worth like thousands of hours of therapy, because you get it on a somatic level. Exactly. And this is where we really, all issues are held in our tissues. I'm going to say that again. All issues are held in our tissues. Our body exists in the present moment. We go into the masculine in therapy, looping in the mind, trying to solve something that actually is held in the body. So that's where the feminine embodiment practice is, of moving the body to release those held traumas in a healthy, held, and safe space, so the body and the person feels safe enough to now face that trauma, so that it no longer controls their life. And so that then underneath that trauma, what's there is your joy and your natural essence of your natural feminine nature, your true nature, which is connected to the earth, connected to Gaia. So what I attempt to do is to bring awareness through the dance, through the practices of the Shakti, or the life force energy current that's flowing through us, which is a dance. We're moving through a universe that is, it's a dance, and the music is the cosmic sound of the universe. And when we can tune in to all of that and align ourselves with all of that, life becomes fun and life becomes enjoyable and life becomes the great mystery that many of the sages speak about. Life becomes that. You actually start to be participating in it, because one of the cruelest and most powerful tools that has been used against humanity for the long time is to make us believe that we are separate from
Yes.
source. Whether you call it the goddess, whether you call it God, whether you call it Buddha, whether you call it Christ consciousness, whatever you want to call that life force energy, we are all participating in that. And I feel like this is another huge piece that humanity, one of the tools that was done to us through all the great religions to make us give away our power, that we have to go through a middleman, a priest, or
totally
somebody else in order to
who
have
is
that
like
communication,
better at it than us, or more connected than us, or whatever the case may be.
Yes. And that we are, a sinner somehow, and that, of course we can't have that connection with the divine because we're not divine. No, I don't believe any of that stuff. I believe that we are each born divine, and we each maintain that divine connection, and we each have a journey to walk, and it's going to be different for each one of us. And we are each carrying a seed inside our heart. That's why I love to use that. I've somehow found a way with my passion and my love for seeds, which by the way comes because my older brother used to tease me when I was little. And he would say to me, when they were talking about like all great things and everything, remember when we did this, or we had, remember when we went there or whatever. And, little me, 5, 6, 7 years old would pipe up, oh, remember when we did this? And my brother would turn to me and say, you were just a seed, because I wasn't born yet, kind of thing. Right. So in my life, it was interesting that I went to the nth degree to find importance in seeds. Mm-hmm. And, the seed is everything. The seed is the potential. It's true. We were all once just a seed, and that's life in full potential. We're each given that gift. And if we give it the right conditions, like coming to one of my retreats or coming and doing a training with me or coming, I see myself as that activator, that's what I call myself. It's like, I am the compost. I am the nutrition. I am the water, the sunlight, the inspiration to then germinate what is already inside of people, to help to pull away all the masks and, the things that are blocking the sunlight from directly shining in and igniting your passion for what it is you're passionate about. And I use the tools that I love, which is dance, music breath work, human connection, authentic relating, ceremonies, these things to bring us to this awakening of this current that is flowing through all of us as long as we're breathing. This current of Shakti that is flowing through us.
Absolutely.
And, the giving the space and time, because we're all, another one of the tools in this Western modern world is there's no longer time anymore for the arts, which the arts are more in that spiritual, creative life force flow, And, when you see a culture like living in Bali and you see a culture that has highly advanced arts developed, well, those are symbols that show that a culture had developed not only sustainability, but regenerative ability within their community, within their culture, within the very fabric of their society. They've woven in arts and spirituality as prioritizing that so that they were not working 24/7. And then when you see the Western paradigm coming in, nobody has time to do
I don't have time for anything. Yep. The answer to everything all the time is, I didn't have time, or I didn't have a chance.
Exactly. So my invitation with the workshops that I run and with the trainings that I run is to give yourself time to cultivate the tools and the practices of an empowered education, to cultivate time and space to connect with your innate feminine nature, so that this ecstatic dancing doesn't just go in the direction of, being male dominated, with that energy and leading it more and more into that versus what it originally came about as a conscious, so taking people on a conscious movement journey. But really, she's the most divine, gorgeous, amazing, beautiful planet. So I want to bring people back to deeply connect with the elements.
Absolutely.
While I'm working with this map of the 5 elements, it's like I want them to not just cognitively understand that, but I want them to, breathe it in, feel it through their own feet, to dance on the earth, to stand underneath a powerful waterfall and go, that's the power of water. It's not just all flowy and, it's a tsunami as well sometimes, but it's got a different feel to it than solid earth. And, so bringing in those qualities when you're actually like, go, oh, now I get it. Once the body feels it, just like a trauma, it holds on to it. So it's like you can then reference back to that anytime you need, you can come back and tap into that. So
absolutely. So there you have it, folks. Part 1 of 2 with Malaika. Really interesting stuff. She's really excited, really connected person. We both have curly hair, so of course we get along. Don't forget to follow the podcast, subscribe to the podcast. If you're on Spotify, the follow button is right underneath the album art for the podcast. And if you're on YouTube and iTunes, you can subscribe. It would mean a lot to me if you did that. It would keep this podcast going. And also don't forget to interact with the polls and questions and send all of your feedback. You can always reach out to me on Instagram as well. We love to hear about what spirituality means to you. See you next week. Thank you for joining me on today's Spirituality What? Adventure. Subscribe, rate, review, and share this podcast. Visit us on Instagram at spirituality.what to interact, tell us what spirituality means to you, and even provide some of your own personal musings. Human on, you phenomenal spiritual beings.